the starting point for me was the fact that I'd heard about this, what Callahan had done through the API, and I wondered about this. And when I saw that Callahan was a close associate of Ellis's, and Ellis was my mentor, it gave me credibility. Callahan was there at the cutting edge of the transition of the major transition from psychoanalysis to cognitive behavioural therapy when I did it. So, from a research practitioner's point of view, you could look at the idea is, well, that what I probably did was I continued to try and disprove it. So it's the Popperian notion of science. Karl Popper had this notion of that what we really want to do in scientific endeavour is to set up a statement about something we're trying to test that would be disprovable. Distress there. And we can still treat those people. What we do is we take them through all the different levels of the reverse. They're climbing up the wall by the time they get to see me, because that's a good state to treat them when they're really dying for a cigarette. So in they come, we sit down, and say, okay, now, what would be your urge to have a cigarette right now as you think about it? Oh, nothing, I just have one in the car park before I come in here. But anyway, so sometimes that's the problem. That it might be a severe trauma, for example. What would be the level of stress associated with thinking about that on a 1 to 10 scale? I might say 100, 130. You go with the 130, okay? And let's say it's still a 10. Get this out again. Okay, so we do. So what we have here is a specific PR. Okay, so we do side of hand by 10. Okay, just use the SQ as shorthand.
So essentially for everyone, you repeat the major sequence as the last process.
Yeah, yeah.
So they're actually whole ones.
Yeah, they're all, that's right, they're all whole. That's the architecture of TFT. Another really nifty way we can use TFT in circumstances, and it looks as if maybe in this situation it would be. I want you to think about how you are at the moment with all of this, okay, which is distressed, which is holding back on moving forward, and all that, and then how you ideally would like to rate these three things. But don't rate yourself. This is what we call the gap treatment, which is really nifty stuff that can be used in all sorts of different situations. And you get them to think about the gap between how he is at the moment with all of this stuff going on, a whole lot of it, and how he ideally would like to. Because it's usually pretty tricky to get some of these ideas across, but I think we've done it. And any questions about the mechanics of what we do in terms of applying the major treatments, the reversals, the reversal correction? Questions about that? I think you've got it all. I think, having understood this, now the flowchart makes sense, and you've forgotten about being able to go with that flowchart. Any sort of confusion whatsoever about the flowchart? What was it? Anyway, she had some tooth problem, and she emerged. She had this fear of going to dentist since she was 5 years old. And so we went back, well, what happened when you were 5? You know, I was in the dentist, and the dentist slapped me across. You've got trauma. So her fear of dentists, it didn't come out of the blue, it was trauma-based. So we need to deal with the past issues first, and then we deal with the future issue. I need to think about going to the dentist next week. What's your fear? We'll deal with the fear. So past issues, then future. Well, let me just run through it one more time. Because what we're going to do is we're going to set you loose on each other. This sort of philosophy, instead of being prone to being on the bottom tracks, we're much more likely to operate on the top tracks when things don't go well for us. And instead of seeing ourselves as a failure, we see ourselves as fallible. then we have this thing we call USA. It's an Albert Ellis notion, which is unconditional self-acceptance. The way we look at fear in TFT is it's a future-oriented thing.
Well,
You see, in that situation, that's past.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be fear so
Yeah.
much.
Trauma.
There may have been fear,
Yeah.
and the fact that they were fearful would be more under the banner of a traumatic experience. You see, if it's work out by talking to them which is the relevant treatment, whether it's a trauma one, it might be trauma and anger, about anger with the parents. Well, it can be both.
Or both, yeah.
Yeah, so you can have a disruption, like, I know I get this quite commonly for kids of sort of early adolescence being ripped from, we're moving to Australia. Or my friends, I'm sorry, but we're going. They have no choice in the matter.
Sure.
So that would be trauma and possibly loss.
So there's a whole lot of aspects to it. You check them out, and every algorithm appropriate you do. So this is an investigative area.
Yes,
Okay.
it must be the level of emotional pain or distress that's associated with thinking about that gap. And then we use the love-pain algorithm to deal with the emotional pain about the gap. And that is, if you remember, eyebrow, under the eye, under the arm, end of the little finger, and the collarbone, 9G SQ. Can be, in a work situation, you can be having a difficult situation with a co-worker, for example. So we can use the gap. This person as a co-worker, as they have been for you, as you ideally would have liked them to have been, or like them to be as a co-worker, and the gap, and deal with that. Unconditional self-acceptance of accepting myself as a valuable, worthwhile, deserving, fallible human being, no matter what, under all circumstances. Starts to lift, and then before it's actually resolved, anger can come up. The idea is to go with that anger, deal with that. And then you can have maybe guilt comes up, just an example, deal with the guilt. And then when that's resolved, go back to the original one, deal with anything that's left there, and then go to the secondary one, deal with anything that's left there. Let's use this half hour to do some practice in really elegant aspects of TFT. I think I might have mentioned it before, but what I would usually say in that sort of situation is say, now, are there any of those instances of that stand out from amongst the others? And typically, in my experience with these sorts of things, there may have this on your desk. Don't be afraid to use it when you're doing it with people, because one of the problems is it can be daunting to try this in the first place. And so, if you have any problems with that, deal with it in the next practice session. Once you start doing it, you'll get the knack of it. It's marvellous. So this is where TFT really comes to its own, is in getting to this stuff, getting this stuff sorted out. This is the premier application of TFT. So the vulnerabilities would be David Barlow's first level of vulnerability is sort of constitutional, genetic, inherited sorts of vulnerabilities. But underlying that, we can have unresolved life issues. And most of us, one way or the other, have some of these unresolved life issues going on. And so the way that we look at it, it's just the psychosomatic process. The existence of unresolved life issues can act to tip the vulnerabilities into the symptoms. So while it makes sense to deal directly with symptoms, it also makes an awful lot of sense, particularly if you have the mechanisms for, in most cases, quite easily doing this, is to take a bottom-up approach to looking at identifying any of these unresolved life issues that might be there